All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today we're looking back at one of the most infamous crimes in American history, the Lindbergh Kidnapping.
A story that really captures the imagination even almost 100 years later.
So we're talking about Charles Lindbergh, of course.
Yeah, the aviator.
The guy who flew solo across the Atlantic. Everybody knows the name.
Right, but his story takes this dark, dark turn in 1932.
And that's what we're looking into today.
A case that has it all. A celebrity victim, this huge ransom, mysterious clues.
Oh, yeah. And ultimately, a really devastating discovery. It captivated the entire nation back then.
And even today, there are all these questions surrounding the case that just keep people talking.
It almost seems too wild to even be true.
I know what you mean.
So let's go back to the beginning. Rewind back to March 1st, 1932.
Okay.
Picture this. It's around 9 p.m. in Hopewell, New Jersey. The Lindberghs are at home, just like any other night.
Seemingly.
Putting their 20-month-old son, Charles Jr., to bed.
And that's when everything changes?
Yeah, when the seemingly ordinary becomes a parent's worst nightmare.
Right. The Lindbergh's nurse, Betty Gow, went to check on the baby later that night and found just an empty crib.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine that panic, like finding that empty crib.
Oh, it's just awful.
So what did they find? What did investigators find at the scene?
Well, it was a puzzling scene. There were muddy footprints right outside the nursery window, a ransom note demanding $50,000, but no fingerprints.
So it was just this broken ladder and this chilling message.
Yeah.
A broken ladder, huh? And it seems like at least they have some idea of how the kidnapper got in.
Right, up that ladder.
So is that the only ransom note that they got?
Well, that's what really gets interesting. So that first note, that was just the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So over the next few weeks, the Lindberghs received a total of 13 ransom notes.
13. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It seems like whoever did this was really intent on making some sort of deal.
Yeah, they definitely wanted to communicate.
But what was their end goal here? Like, did they actually plan to return the child?
Well, that's the question that just haunted everyone involved. Was this actually a kidnapping for ransom, or was there something else going on, something more sinister?
Right.
To try and answer that question, I think we really have to look at the guy who became the intermediary in this whole ordeal, Dr. John F. Condon.
Dr. John F. Condon.
Yeah.
A retired school teacher. That's an interesting choice for sure. What made him the go-to person for both sides, for the Lindberghs and the kidnappers?
Yeah, it is interesting.
It's not your typical intermediary.
Well, Condon was kind of a local celebrity, well-respected in the community. He even wrote letters to the newspapers about the case.
Oh, wow.
So when he offered to act as this go-between, both sides seemed to find him trustworthy, at least enough to talk.
I guess so.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Condon's name involved, right? He actually used a code name to communicate with these kidnappers.
He did. He used the code name Jafsy to communicate with the kidnapper, and they did it through these newspaper columns.
Wow, it's like something out of a movie.
Oh.
So it adds another layer of mystery to this already bizarre situation.
Totally.
And the ransom demands, those kept increasing, right?
Yeah, they did. They ultimately went up to $70,000.
$70,000. That's an insane amount for back then. I mean, that's over $1 million in today's money.
It is.
Really shows you how high profile this whole case was.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the lengths the kidnappers were willing to go to.
They were committed.
Did they ever give any proof that Charles Jr. was still alive?
They did. During all these back and forths, Condon, he was actually given a piece of baby clothing, a sleeping suit.
Okay.
And it was thought to belong to Charles Jr.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, was this genuine? Was this real proof that he was alive? Or was it just this cruel tactic to keep hope alive and the money flowing?
It's just heartbreaking to even think about.
It really is.
Sadly, despite the ransom, all the negotiations and efforts to locate Charles Jr., it took an even more devastating turn.
It did. It really did. On May 12th, 1932, so over 2 months after the kidnapping, the just unthinkable happened. They found the baby's body.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't even because of the ransom instructions or anything.
It was just a tragic twist of fate.
It really was.
So what happened? How was the baby found?
A truck driver, he had just stopped on the side of the road, and that's when he just stumbled upon the baby's remains.
Oh, how awful.
And it's even more chilling because it was only a few miles from the Lindbergh home.
Oh my gosh, he was right there the whole time.
So close.
After all the searching and the negotiations and everything.
I know.
They have the baby found so close to home. It just adds to the tragedy.
Yeah, it does.
And to think that he had already been dead for 2 months, it's clear that the ransom was they were never going to.
It was a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The autopsy, it revealed that Charles Jr. had died from a blow to the head.
Right.
So was it intentional? Or was it some kind of tragic accident during the kidnapping?
Right.
We still don't know.
It still lingers, that question.
But with the baby's death confirmed, the investigation, it took on this whole new urgent direction they had to find the killer.
Right.
And that search for justice led to one of the most controversial trials in American history.
It did.
And that's what we're going to be getting into next.
After the break.
So the focus shifted from finding Charles Jr. to finding his killer.
And there was a lot of pressure on investigators to solve this case.
Oh, I bet. Especially back then, it was 1932. No DNA evidence, none of the forensic tools that we have today.
Right. They were working with limited technology.
Yeah.
And facing this intense public scrutiny, everyone wanted answers.
Of course.
Yeah.
So how did they finally get a break in this case?
Well, it really came down to a sharp eye and meticulous record keeping. So in 1933,
Okay.
over a year after the kidnapping, a gas station attendant in New York City noticed something strange about a $10 gold certificate.
What, a $10 bill? What was so strange about that?
Well, at the time, gold certificates were being recalled by the government.
Okay.
And this attendant, Walter Lyle, he remembered reading that some of the ransom money paid to the kidnappers was in these gold certificates. So he took a chance and wrote down the license plate number of the customer's car.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about being observant.
Yeah, right place, right time.
So did that lead them to a suspect?
It did. That license plate number led investigators to Bruno Richard Hauptmann,
Okay.
a German immigrant. He was a carpenter living in the Bronx.
Okay.
And when they searched his garage, they found over $13,000 in ransom money.
Wow, that seems like pretty damning evidence.
It does, but Hauptmann, he claimed he was innocent.
He did.
Yeah, he said the money belonged to a friend of his, this guy Isidor Fesch, who had left it with him before returning to Germany, just in a shoebox.
In a shoebox.
Yeah, and Fish later died, so he couldn't exactly vouch for Hauptmann, right?
Right, so it becomes a question of who to believe.
Exactly, Hauptmann's word against this mounting evidence.
Did they have anything else linking him to the crime besides the money?
They did. Remember that broken ladder from the crime scene?
Oh, yeah.
Well, experts, they compared the wood used in that ladder to wood found in Hauptmann's attic. And they concluded that it was a match.
Hold on. How reliable was wood analysis back then? Couldn't wood from different sources have, similar characteristics?
That's a good point. Forensic science wasn't nearly as advanced then as it is today. But at the time, the wood analysis, along with some other pieces of evidence, seemed to point to Hauptmann.
What other evidence did they have?
Well, they found Dr. Condon's phone number written on a piece of paper in Hauptmann's closet.
Oh, wow. The go-between.
Yeah, remember.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big coincidence.
Yeah. Understatement of the century.
Yeah, so Hauptmann, he denied ever meeting Condon, said he didn't know his phone number.
But with the ransom money, the ladder wood, and Condon's phone number, it seems like the prosecution, they felt like they had a pretty strong case.
They thought so.
So this set the stage for what was dubbed the trial of the century. Can you describe the atmosphere surrounding this trial?
It was a media frenzy.
Yeah.
The Lindbergh kidnapping had gripped the nation for over 2 years by this point. Reporters, spectators, they packed the courtroom in Flemington, New Jersey. They all wanted to witness this historic trial.
I bet the pressure on the jury was immense, like the whole country's watching,
Oh, absolutely.
waiting for their verdict.
Yeah.
So what did the defense argue?
They maintained that Hauptmann was innocent and that the evidence was all circumstantial.
Right.
They pointed to inconsistencies in witness testimony and suggested that the real kidnapper was still out there.
But the prosecution, they had the ransom money, the ladder, and Condon's phone number.
Right.
Did they present anything else?
Yeah, they brought in handwriting experts who testified that the handwriting in the ransom notes matched Hauptmann's handwriting.
But handwriting analysis back then, that wasn't as precise as it is today, right?
No, it wasn't.
It's amazing how much forensic science has evolved.
It really is.
So much of the evidence presented back then wouldn't necessarily hold up in a courtroom today.
It's true.
So what was the jury's verdict?
After 11 hours of deliberation, they found Bruno Richard Hauptmann guilty of kidnapping and murder.
Guilty. So what was his sentence? And did he ever confess?
He was sentenced to death, and despite maintaining his innocence throughout the trial and all the appeals, Hauptmann was executed on April 3rd, 1936.
So the man convicted of kidnapping and murdering the Lindbergh baby was executed, case closed.
Well, not so fast.
What do you mean?
Well, even with Hauptmann's execution, there were these lingering doubts and unanswered questions that fueled speculation and all these conspiracy theories for decades.
Oh, see, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
We've covered the official narrative so far, but there's got to be more to the story.
Oh, there is.
What if there's more to this story than meets the eye?
Yeah.
So we talked about the official story, the kidnapping, all those ransom notes, the trial, and Hauptmann's execution.
Right, but like we were saying.
But there are people who believe there's got to be more to it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what are some of those alternative theories about the Lindbergh kidnapping?
Well, some researchers, they've explored the idea that maybe Hauptmann, he wasn't working alone. Maybe he was part of something bigger.
A conspiracy.
Yeah, like a conspiracy. Maybe someone else planned the whole kidnapping and Hauptmann was just, a pawn.
Right, like he was just a small part of this much bigger plan.
Exactly.
That would maybe explain why there were so many ransom notes.
Right.
And why the exchange was so drawn out, like they really wanted to drag it on.
It does make you wonder.
Is there any evidence at all to support a conspiracy theory?
No concrete proof, but there are these little details that don't quite fit.
Oh, like what?
Well, some people believe that the ladder they used, the one to get to the nursery, was just too flimsy to have been used by one person alone.
So they think there had to be at least two people involved.
At least, yeah, one to hold the ladder and one to actually climb up to that window.
That makes sense. But who else could have been involved? And what would their motive even be?
Well, some theories point to organized crime.
Oh, okay.
This was during Prohibition. And gangsters, they were involved in all sorts of illegal activities.
Of course.
So maybe the Lindbergh kidnapping was just supposed to be a quick ransom grab, but something went wrong.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a theory. I mean, a high-profile target like Charles Lindbergh, that would attract attention from anyone looking for a big payout.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Are there any other theories out there?
There's one, it's one of the most controversial theories, and it's the one that just keeps fascinating people even today, and it involves Charles Lindbergh himself.
Wait, are you saying that some people think Lindbergh could have been involved in his own son's kidnapping?
Yeah, it does sound hard to believe.
It sounds impossible. It's his son.
I know, but there are those who believe he might have played some role, even if it wasn't intentional.
Okay, so help me understand this. What's the theory here?
Well, think about the time. It was a time when eugenics was kind of gaining popularity.
Eugenics, that's the belief that you can improve the human race through, like, selective breeding.
Right.
And Lindbergh, he was known to have some, let's just say, controversial views on that subject.
He did.
So you're saying that his beliefs in eugenics could be connected to the kidnapping, but how?
Well, you see, Charles Jr., there were these rumors that he had some health issues.
Right, like rickets or hammer toes, and they said he had a really large head.
Exactly. And some people suggested maybe even developmental delays.
And all of that was just rumors and speculation.
Right. But some researchers have suggested that Lindbergh, with his belief in eugenics, might have seen these potential health issues as like a threat to his family legacy.
It's a disturbing thought, for sure, but I guess I can see how someone might connect those dots. But why would he stage his own son's kidnapping? I mean, it's a huge risk. If the truth ever got out, his whole reputation would be ruined.
That's the biggest challenge for this theory. You have to believe that Lindbergh was willing to do something that crazy, put his own son at risk, just to protect his image and promote his beliefs.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. Are there any other parts of Lindbergh's behavior that make people think this theory is possible?
Yeah, some point to his actions during the whole investigation, like he was really controlling with information. He limited who could access the crime scene.
Oh?
And he even insisted that they cremate the baby's body soon after they found it.
It does seem a little strange, almost like he was trying to, cover something up.
And there's one more thing, one more detail.
What was that?
Well, Lindbergh just happened to be home the night of the kidnapping.
Right, he usually stayed in New York City during the week, right?
Yeah, so was it just a coincidence? Or was it something more?
It's one of those details that just makes you wonder, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of little details.
So we got a lot of theories. Was Hauptmann a lone wolf? A desperate man who just saw this chance to get rich?
Right.
Or was he part of a bigger conspiracy?
Right. Maybe the mob?
Right. Or was there something even darker at play?
We may never know.
This is also fascinating, but it's also just really sad. A young child lost his life, and despite the trial, the conviction, we're still left with all of these unanswered questions.
That's true.
Knowing all of this, what do you think? Was justice really served?
Well, I think it's important to remember that the evidence they used to convict Hauptmann, it was largely circumstantial.
Right, the money, the ladder, the phone number.
Right, it's compelling, but it's not conclusive. And all these questions about the other theories, it makes it hard to say for sure if the right person was punished.
So even after all these years, the Lindbergh kidnapping remains kind of an unsolved puzzle.
Yeah, it's a case that really makes you think, examine the evidence, consider different perspectives.
And that's why it's still so captivating, even today, almost 100 years later.
Right, maybe someday new evidence will come to light and finally give us some answers.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. I started out thinking it was a pretty open and shut case, but it's so much more complex and mysterious than I ever imagined.
It really is.
So to our listeners out there, if you're as fascinated by this case as we are, there are some excellent resources available for you to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, definitely.
You can start with that Smithsonian article. It's a good overview of the trial and some of the main players.
And if you want to go even further and explore those conspiracy theories, like the idea that Lindbergh might have been involved, I highly recommend Lloyd Gardner's book, The Case That Never Dies.
It's a really good read.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So the Lindbergh kidnapping is a story about fame, about tragedy, and really about the enduring power of these unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even in cases that seem clear-cut, there could be these hidden layers of complexity, ambiguity, things that challenge our understanding of truth and justice.
Definitely.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Lindbergh kidnapping.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop learning.